hand in hand.
That's
right. If you don't incorporate social justice, then you're limiting your potential as a true badass teacher. So what does that actually mean? Before we can get into what does social justice mean, it's a broad notion, and it encompasses a variety of beliefs, knowledge, and commitment to action that will dismantle a system of oppressions that affect us all. But before we can really get into what does social justice education mean, we have to ask and answer some tough questions about the nature of schooling, the purpose of education, schools as the great equalizer, the effects of teacher beliefs on student outcomes, and the role schools play in reproducing our social inequities that we see today. So we're going to go through and talk about some of those, and once we discuss these, then we can really develop a better understanding of what social justice education entails. So the first question, should it be the down arrow working? There we go. Is what is the purpose of education? And I was going to have you guys write, but we can talk a little bit about it. And I have a few things on there, but I want to get some of your thoughts on what do you see as the purpose of education in our society today? Cultural transmission, yes.
Not college.
Not college and career ready, but what I like to call debt and low wage work ready.
Oh, shit.
To create a better future.
To create a better future, yes. Lots of good things. What else?
Learning to ask the right questions, and plenty of them.
Yes, asking the right questions about everything. Yeah.
Finding your passion and sharing it.
Passion.
Yeah, passion.
Yeah.
Good and caring, compassionate people.
Good and caring, compassionate people. You know what I didn't hear? To prepare people to work. That is just one aspect of education, but it should not be the purpose of all education.
To raise test scores.
I didn't hear that either. Said no teacher ever. But some of the things I thought of when I look at this question, what is the purpose of education? To provide students with the knowledge needed to contribute to society, right? We need knowledge and skills if we're going to make the society keep going. And that's part of it, and you have to have that. Some other things that we heard. To unlock the potential in all of us. You can't be that great person you're meant to be without the education behind it to help you. And lastly, to prepare students for the responsibilities of living in society. It's a privilege and a blessing. You have rights and you have responsibilities. And part of education is understanding that. But too often the corporate deformers, the neoliberals, the conservatives focus on the economic purpose of education. And there is an economic purpose of education. We do need workers, we do need to produce things, we need that sort of thing. But that's not the only purpose of education. We have to look at the social life, the political life, the economic life, the moral life, and the civic life that we want our citizens to develop. So once we get through this purpose of education, we need to look at do schools provide children with equal opportunity, or are schools the great equalizer? If we think about the construction of education, it was the idea that if we're going to be a meritocracy, we must have a system that equalizes opportunity for all. You know, we wanted America to be this place where if you were born poor, you didn't have to stay poor. You could come out of that, and that means you need something, a vehicle that gets people there, and that was the dream of public education. But has it been realized for everyone? Are schools, do schools provide children with equal opportunity? What are some ways in which schools do not provide children with equal opportunity? Funding.
Yeah, funding. That if you live in a wealthier municipality, your schools are going to be better than if you don't.
Yeah, property taxes, right? Which is the most unequal thing you can imagine for school funding, because guess what? Poor neighborhoods have very little property taxes. So it's not their fault that they can't, you know, pay for a librarian or buy books or do all these things. They don't have the money, and that's set up by design.
In our district, if the kindergarten classes are funded by the state, then you have to do assessments of those children. And the ones that aren't provided by the state, they don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So we are testing our poor children and teaching our rich kids.
Yeah, and that is a big difference, right? We're giving two different systems of education to two different people.
Discipline and selective enrollment.
Yes, right? We have discipline. We have a school here in D.C., one of the famous high schools, Dunbar High School, great high school. Recently redone, spent millions of dollars. Guess now what they want to do? They want selective admission. They want to be able to say who comes to their school so they can push out the low test score students who live 3 blocks from that school in the same projects that was there before the school got beautified. They don't want to deal with those kids anymore because they're holding down the test scores. Selective admission is not about providing students with equal opportunity. Curriculum choices, yes. The differences of what students can take in different schools, right? I went to a fortunate school. I went to an all-white school where I could take advanced chemistry and advanced physics and all that. And then you go to other schools where those things are not even offered to students. And those curriculum opportunities affect what kind of opportunities students can have as well. So we have to ask ourselves, do schools provide all children with equal opportunity? Here are some ways that I listed on here that they do not. We have the achievement gap, which pretty much says if you are not white, middle class, and maybe even Asian and upper class, you do not do well compared to those students. Low-income and minority students struggle. That is a reflection that we have an opportunity gap within our school system. We also have graduation disparities, right? That low-income students, students of color, tend to graduate less than other students. Most call it dropout. I call it push-out. They're
Yes.
by design. They are pushed out of school. So we know the dropout statistics, and we know what happens there as well. And we have this income inequality based as a result of school experiences. I was reading this article yesterday, and one thing that struck me was that we know that if you don't have a high school diploma, you're going to make less money than people who do. So there's a direct connection between your school experiences and the life you can lead outside of that. So I was at a meeting this weekend on a board for a teacher education group, and one of our student reps board members, he dropped out of high school when he was in school because the teacher told him he would never amount to anything. And he started working, and his mom said, please go back and get your GED. He went back and got his GED. One of his teachers said, man, you need to be in college, you need to be a teacher. He got a full ride scholarship. He just got a job teaching high school social studies, and he's finally seen the path to education. But none of that would have happened if he didn't have those equal opportunities, someone pulling for him, someone rooting for him. He wouldn't be the young man he is today, prepared to teach students in New Orleans about social studies and history and civics. And he's not Teach for America, but he is working at a charter school because it's New Orleans. And they're all charter schools. Another way that schools are unequal opportunity, the school or cradle to prison pipeline, as we have learned, right? The school or cradle to prison pipeline means there's a path for some students from school to juvenile delinquency to prison, and even to death for some of those students. These show that we do not have equal opportunities for all students in all schools. The next question we want to look at, are all children capable of learning and worthy of being taught?
No.
And this goes directly to teacher beliefs. And this was something I read that was very interesting. Teacher beliefs affect the student outcomes in the classroom. And most of our beliefs, it's not that we're mean-spirited people, but we have these beliefs based on our own experiences that do not typically take into account other people's perspectives. When you do studies on teachers' beliefs, we tend to find, there was one study where they said they showed teachers pictures of young children, black and white, all dressed the same, and they were asked to guess their GPA, their IQ, their motivation. Consistently, they saw the black students as being not as smart, not as motivated, not as driven. These beliefs then influence how they deal with these students in the classroom. And it happens to all teachers, black teachers too. I teach a historically black college, and it's the same mindset. They come in with the same excuses. So it's not just a white teachers versus black teacher, it's all teachers in the society and how they view the outcomes of students. So how are some ways that, when we ask ourselves this question, what we're really talking about is teacher belief?
If I could, I'm sorry, can I
Yeah.
I mean, not just them, it's also when you do it, they make prejudgments about Asian students.
Yes, exactly, the model minority myth, exactly, that we keep hearing, that other thing, that also changes them. So we know it affects their outcomes. And we also know, one of the things we have to understand is what our beliefs impact and how we learn. When you think about it as a learner, when you're confronted with new information, and this goes back to our Piaget roots, and you'll see my professor self come out, you do two things, right? You're going to assimilate the new information, you're going to accommodate it. But research has also shown that when something challenges your prior beliefs, you are more likely to dispel that information because you don't want to make room for it, right? Cognitive dissonance, right? It challenges you, and you would hope that we would make room for it, saying, okay, maybe what I was thinking was wrong, but a lot of us do not. We can't accept this new information. So if we're basing what we're learning about students on our prior beliefs, then it's hard to accept this new information about them and to make that a reality. And so we have to be aware of teachers' beliefs as well. And the effects of colorblind beliefs. And this is what's really difficult, because when I hear people say they're colorblind, I get it. First of all, if you don't see that I'm a black person, you need to go to a doctor. I am not just black, I am very black. You can't ignore that. But that's not what people mean. I get it. You mean I don't take into account a person's race. But here's the thing, what you really mean is I don't take into account what race means in your life.
Right.
Because it doesn't mean anything in my life. That is not okay to say that. I get it. We all have different experiences. But to deny my experiences because they don't fit to your belief doesn't help me, it doesn't help you, it doesn't help colorblind is a good thing.
Yes.
It's not. Being color appreciative, being full of diversity, welcoming it, understanding that it's a good thing, that it's what we've always done in this society is what we really need to do. And we see this in BadAss teachers. We see great teachers with great ideas, but they're hampered by this colorblind belief. They can't get past it, and it stops them from developing cultural competence and embracing social justice education. So the next question is, how do schools contribute to the creation of social inequities? I ask this question of my students in my Urban Foundations class a lot. Do schools mirror what we see in society? And if so, how do they? And some of them get it. When we look at the attributes of good communities, we see those attributes in the good schools that service those communities. When we look at what we call negative communities or disadvantaged communities, we see those attributes in the schools that also service those communities. Schools are not inherently oppressive, but because schools are run by people who have been acculturated and assimilated into the current societal structures, they tend to reproduce these things that we see. This includes institutions of racism, sexism, classism, and other types of oppression. We must be intentional about how schools function, with a clear understanding that schools can and do mirror the inequities we see in society today. So let's take a look at some of these examples here. Sorting students. We don't want to believe it, but school is a sorter. That's what we do all day, every day. And we as teachers, we are leading the sorting, whether we want to or not. When we say, oh, you don't qualify for this, we're sorting you. And those things can follow you. We always wonder why low-income parents or sometimes parents of color don't want their children labeled as special education even though they know they need the help, because it will follow them. They will be sorted into that trap for the rest of their life with no opportunity to get out. And so we have to understand that's what schools do, and we play a role in that. And so what can we do about it? Schools also reinforce the myth of meritocracy. And I'm here to tell you it is a myth. It is a myth. We want to believe that hard work, determination, grit, hate that word, is all that it takes to be successful in life. But if that was true, African mothers would be the most successful people in the world, because have you seen those women and what they do in their countries, carrying children on their backs along with water buckets? They work hard. They are not successful. Hard work doesn't always lead to success. There are other things that play into a factor. You can be advantaged or disadvantaged based on your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, the color of your skin, your parents' income, your ability to speak English and to speak it well, your disposition. Look, I was successful in school. I'm a nerd. I was very successful. I did well. My teachers loved me because I had the dispositions to be good in school. But not everyone does. And they're hampered by that because we're not working with them. We're saying, oh, you don't show up with the respect that I demand of you, then you're not going to succeed. And we can't demand that anymore. We can't expect students to just give us our respect when their communities have been disrespected by our schools.
Yes.
And then the biggest way that we reproduce inequities is the blame game. And this is one that I tell my students this every year. Don't play the blame game. If I hear you tell me he's not doing well in school because his parents don't care, you're playing the blame game. If I hear you tell me, oh, that teacher just doesn't care, she's not trying hard enough, you're playing the blame game. We can blame everyone. There's some people we can blame, like Arnie Duncan. And those types of people, because we see what they're doing to actively harm what we're trying to do. But when we blame each other, our communities, our parents, our students, we set up to reproduce the social inequity. We wash our hands of the situation. There's nothing I can do, they just don't care. Let me tell you something. I believe all parents love and care about their children. All parents love and care about their children. Drug-addicted parents love and care about their children. They are suffering through an addiction, and they can't always show that love and care, but they do. When I think of my own experience going to school, when I got to graduate school, I realized, man, my teachers must have thought my mom was the most unloving, uncaring parent in the world. She didn't come to anything at school. We didn't have a car. We grew up in the suburbs. Single mother, 5 kids. She's not coming up there unless it's like disaster, like you got stitches or something. Maybe she'll come up there. But at home, they didn't know what my mom was about. My mom was about making sure that we went to school, and by golly, if we didn't graduate, she would have killed us. I mean, literally, she was serious about us doing well. But that doesn't translate into the ways of middle-class societies and how they do it. My mom was invalued because she didn't drive to soccer practice. She didn't come to the PTA meeting. She didn't buy these things for kids. She couldn't do any of that. But she still loved us, and she still cared about us and demanded that we do well in school. And it's important that we see what happens when we play the blame game. Because to blame my mother for not being there is to just make her a victim all over again. Parents do the best they can, and we have to be wary of that as much as we can. So now let's think about what is social justice education and what does it mean. Once we understand the purpose of schools, how schools do or don't provide equal opportunities for all students, and how teachers' beliefs affect student outcomes, we can begin to understand what social justice education is and why it is needed. So the first part, I like to think of social justice education as a belief that public schools do not serve all children well. This is very hard for some of us to accept, especially if you have a very good memory of schooling, and I do. I had great school experiences for the most part because I had the dispositions my teachers were looking for. Because I showed up and I had a willingness to learn and I was happy to be there and it was a great relief for me. But not everybody comes to school with those dispositions. And then us as teachers, we either penalize them for that or we fail to accept them where they are. But understand this, schools have not served all children well for a very long time. I hate that people say, oh, if we could just go back to before No Child Left Behind. Before No Child Left Behind, schools were not serving all children well. You have to come to an understanding and an acceptance of that notion. Otherwise, you're setting people up to fail. We also have to have a commitment to teaching all students well, not just the ones who traditionally do well in school, like myself, like most of us who are here, who became teachers because we were such good students. And then you get to school and you're like, wait, but where are all the good students like myself? I tell them this every day, they're not there anymore. They're dying breed. But they can be developed with good school experiences. They can become the person who's engaged in school, but we have to have a commitment to them. It's too easy all too often to say, you don't want to be here, you're not giving me the respect I want, so I'm done with you. But we can't do that to children. We can do that with adults, right? You don't come to me on the level you're supposed to. I don't have to engage with you. But with a child, I can't write you off because you haven't developed the respectful skills I need you to have, or you haven't developed the dispositions I need you to have. Know this, when children are mean, angry, hateful, hurtful, they're communicating with you in some way. It's a challenging behavior as a form of communication. And they're trying to reach out to you. And they have reasons for being hateful, mean, because when they were nice at some point, somebody made them that way. Somebody did something to them. And it's up to us to really work through these issues with the students and to give them the benefit of the doubt. So also, social justice education encompasses culturally relevant teaching. And there's a lot of research on this. Gloria Ladson-Billings, Geneva Gay, and Jacqueline Jordan Irvine are a few places to start. But when we talk about culturally relevant teaching, we talk about teachers who see students' cultures as an asset. To see them, what they come to the table with. Not so much you don't know your letters. You might know your letters, but you know how to navigate through some tricky damn situations in your community. You know how to back off when somebody looks like they're about to blow up because you've learned what those signals are and how to deal with them. Culturally relevant teaching uses the community to help students. Not this idea that your community's so bad you need to get out of it. That does no one any good. Students don't want to hear that at all. It's like talking about your mama. You don't want to hear that. You talk about my mama, I'm never speaking to you again. Like, we have no way to get on. And too many times we as teachers do this in an unintentional way. We talk about students' communities as a negative, as their families as a negative, as education should be something that saves them, to take them away from that. They don't want to leave their communities. They don't want to leave their families. They want to make things better. And we have to come to them with that idea, and that's what culturally relevant teaching does. We also want to look at multicultural education as encompassed in social justice education. And you can look up James Banks, Lisa Delpit, and also Geneva Gay to learn more about multicultural education. And one of the important things is multicultural education is for everybody. How many of you work in school districts that are primarily white? Yes, multicultural education is for you too. All of you. Your students need it just as much as everyone else students needs it. We seem to think that it's only for the other. It's only when we have diversity that we need this. We need it for all groups so that they can understand what it means to live in an increasingly global society. We also need anti-bias education, and that starts in the early childhood years. And Lisa Derman Sparks has written a great book about what that looks like. And we need to show children how to refrain from using biases in their everyday interactions. They pick up these things in society. I've had children say some pretty incredible things to me, and I know they're not born that way, but they just learn those things. And they have no filter. They'll just look at you and tell you those sorts of things. And it's up to us to challenge their thinking and to provide them with an alternative way of seeing the world. We also need inclusive education. Social justice encompasses the needs of special needs children, English language learners, All of our children are included in this idea of an inclusive education. It's not just about one group. People think we primarily just focus on students of color. It's all students, low-income students, students in rural areas, students in urban areas, students across the globe who need our support. We also need transformative education. Carl Grant and Sleater wrote a very good article about transformative education. What does that look like? The next step to action. Teaching students how to be active in their communities and purposeful about bringing about that change. Because when we inform them about all the bad stuff and we don't give them the tools to fix it, we do them a huge disservice. We get very angry. I was like that. I was very angry because of the disservice that was done. One of the other things I want to mention, how am I doing on time?
Another 5 minutes.
Okay. It's this idea of students and teachers, this idea of being having high expectations and being high and caring. So and I give this myself as an example because I did this as well too. So think of this as a continuum, the expectations high and low, and caring or sensitive to students' backgrounds and needs from low to high. We all want to be here. A high caring teacher and a high expectations teacher says, look, I get it, you have some challenges and I'm going to help you through those, but I'm also going to hold your feet to the fire because you got to do this, and I'm going to keep those expectations high. But sometimes we end up over here, where we're high caring and low expectations. And this was me, and I can give you this example because I didn't think I would be this way, but I ended up. I was teaching kindergarten, and I had this little boy in my kindergarten class, and as soon as he got there, everyone said, oh, you got one of those kids again. His whole family went to the school. Oh, they're not but troublemakers. Oh, good luck. You'll barely see him. I'm like, great. So I have all this information, clouding my relationship with this kid. And yes, through no fault of his own, because he's 5, he missed probably 45 days of school that year. On the days he did come, he came very late. So I knew this and I understood this. So he'd come in and I'd like, I need you to do some work because you were late. I don't feel like it, I'm tired, I can't do it. And because I had high caring, I understood that. But my expectations were low. And so I'd let him go off and not do the work. And then one day I said, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to happen. So he comes in late again. I need you to sit and get this work done. You missed so much school. You have to do this with me. I'm hungry. It's 10 o'clock. We don't go to lunch till 11:30. What have you eaten today? And he pulled out a fun-sized Snickers bar wrapper. And that's all he's had to eat. So now that I have high expectations, but I'm also going to be high caring, okay, I got to do something about this. Go downstairs, get some milk, get some cereal, bring it up here, eat your breakfast, and then you're going to do the work.
Right.
That's badass.
Think about the battle I had to fight to get this boy his cereal.
Right, I know. Trust me.
Somewhere along the way, our lovely cafeteria ladies didn't think he should eat at 10 a.m.
That's right.
It's too late. I don't care what time it is. He's got an hour and a half to go. He can't do the work without the breakfast. We got to get it done. Well, what are the other kids going to think when you let him eat in his classroom? This is what they thought. Miss Jones, why does he get to eat here? Because he was late. So if I'm late, I get to eat here? Yes. A week later, here comes Mom with a bowl of cereal. He told me he could eat this in here if he was late. He can sit over there and eat his bowl of cereal. He knows the rules. It's fine. They got it. Okay? As long as they got the same opportunity, they would get it. But we don't want to be into the point where we have low expectations and we're high caring. It does our children no good. We have to do all of those things together. And of course, there's the high expectations and low caring. And this is what I see a lot from some teachers, their comments. You know, I get it. You had a rough life. I don't care. You need to follow the rules like everybody else. And if you don't, then you're out. I'm sorry. That's not badass. That's not social justice. Students know there are rules, and we know that we want them to follow the rules. But if I can't care about where you come from and be sensitive to your needs, then I don't belong as your teacher in the classroom. And of course, we have the low expectations and the low caring, and hopefully none of us are in that group. But it's just something to think about where we end up. So lastly, social justice education needs badass teachers like you. We all are in this together. And I know it's easy sometimes to say, you know what, I don't got time for this. Let me just teach this unit. Let me just get through this lesson. Let me just do this. But I'm telling you, once you embrace this message and this idea and this way of being, it'll inform everything that you do in the classroom to serve all students well. Thank you.
Yeah!